focus.
Oh shit! There they go! There they go!
I got it.
Okay.
But we gotta sound off fast because probably more's coming.
The whole horror toy shelf is coming down. Well, hey there. Thanks for stopping in to Night Shift Video. My name is James, and tonight I am joined by this fellow over here.
I'm Cody.
I did it!
Nailed it.
I did it! If anyone's watching,
Yep.
they probably saw in my eyes halfway through the sentence.
Like,
I started thinking about the words that were coming out of my mouth.
Here it goes.
You know, a lot of people don't understand that like
Yep.
you can be thinking something completely different while you're talking.
I do it every day.
We talked about this before. I'm
Yeah.
sure you do it now with school, but like
Oh, yeah.
we both have been performing musicians on stages, and
Yep.
like you could be singing a song,
Oh yeah.
and like your mind is like you're saying other things in your mind
Oh, for sure.
while you're singing a song.
Oh yeah.
And then there's like a moment of like, well, I really hope the words that I'm thinking in my mind don't come out of my mouth.
Don't ever come out of my mouth. Oh, especially as a musician. Sometimes it's just like, what's going through my mind? If it comes out of the microphone,
Right.
I might lose my job. I might lose a band member. We might not ever get to play here again. Yes.
So that's exactly what just happened. And I'm sure if anybody is actually backs up the video, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see my eyes, because you can see I lose focus on camera for a second. I'm like, wait, what the fuck? I got to set this up so that it works. And I did it. I did it. And that's what I need to do every single time.
This guy.
If you haven't listened to the last couple episodes, you have no idea what the fuck we're talking about. But don't worry about it. I'm just going to leave it as an inside joke.
Boom.
For people who actually listen consistently. So if you listened to the last time Cody was on, you know what the fuck the big deal is.
Yep.
And there it is.
There it is.
All right. Night shift.
Night shift.
Tonight, I have a little bit of a story. We have a little bit of a story.
A little bit.
So we had a good experience last time with Josh whenever I kind of let him. So I try to do the biggest amount of research for most of the stuff that we do here.
Yeah.
That way, when you guys come in, you can kind of just like jump right in.
Yep.
But I've discovered that it really helps sometimes to know some context, because then it doesn't feel like I'm just telling you a story every time.
Right.
And so it worked really well last week with Josh, so we're going to give that a try again.
Let's go.
And tonight we're going to be talking about the San Francisco Satanic beheading.
Oh.
So this is going to be the story of Leroy Carter Jr. So I'll do a little bit of reading here, and then we'll get into some talky talks about it.
Perfect.
So first of all, on February 7th, 1981, Leroy Carter Jr., a 29-year-old African-American, was walking through Golden Gate State Park in San Francisco. Searching for a place to sleep, he found a secluded spot next to the lake where he slipped into his sleeping bag and went to sleep. The papers did not say much about the murder, but the papers did run the story. It was relegated into a small blurb hidden somewhere near the back. To many, it was just the story of a dead homeless man, and it was only the manner of his death that made it notable. Carter had been found decapitated, and evidence found at the scene may have pointed towards a voodoo ritual. So they end up finding his body.
Yep.
And he had been beheaded. And the strangest part, obviously, in any case like this, is the head's missing.
Yes.
Never a good thing.
There are also some strange things, but
Yep.
yes,
But
I mean the fact that
yeah.
well, and so like I guess I'll start here. Like, 'cause I don't know how, like, you know, like we got a dialogue, we got more to the story.
We got more to the story.
I don't want to reveal too much, but like I think it's really interesting, like where these things aren't, like, to anybody who is unfamiliar with the story. And one of those things like that happened to me earlier was like, okay, it's kind of a classic trope of homeless African-American, 1981,
Transient.
Vietnam veteran.
Mm-hmm.
And so like there's a lot of things. It's almost like I think I've heard the story like
Sure.
20 times.
Sure.
And actually this is something that I remember the first time I ever was exposed to this idea of almost like folklorish stories, like what do I want to say, like reoccurring themes in the same story is like Jarhead, if you've ever seen the movie Jarhead, where like I asked him, a guy who served a career in the military, and he's like,
Yep.
"Oh yeah, everybody has like that same story, specifically from that era." And he's like,
Right.
"Yeah, most of it is literally just lore. Like somebody made it up to scare somebody, and then somebody had like kind of the same experience, or they knew somebody who like heard a story,
Mhm.
and then they created this very fictitious movie about it, or
Right.
it was a book for so like there are these red flags that are going off in my head. Like, okay, yes, yeah, homeless, vet,
Yeah.
African American, 81,
Mhm.
San Francisco, like."
I would say the 81 San Francisco is what, and obviously we'll get into the details, but the fact that there were evidence of some kind of potential ritual
For sure.
is what makes it super interesting to me.
Oh yeah.
As a child of the 90s, the satanic panic phenomenon I find so interesting.
Yes.
And I'm actually listening also to a podcast called Uncover Satanic Panic, which is from the Canadian broadcast company.
Oh, okay.
CBC,
Yeah,
right?
CBC.
Yep, I think that's what it's called.
Yes, it is. Sorry, I used to listen to that when I lived in Detroit.
There's the BBC
Well,
and the ABC.
just keep going right on down the list. When I lived in Detroit, there was CBC One.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Which was like, it was kind of like NPR.
Right.
But then CBC Two, which is what I listened to, was just like unknown alt stuff.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So it was like a lot of stuff that like once I got to Fort Wayne and we talked about music, it was like, oh, I heard that on CBC.
Yeah.
Too. Anyway, sorry.
Very cool.
Get back to that.
So yeah, they have a podcast called Satanic Panic, and it's about a completely different case. It's not this case at all, but similar time frame.
Sure.
And it basically is a story about this small town in Canada that kind of became like an emulation almost of the Salem witch trials with Satanism, and like all these people are being accused by children. Like it's this whole thing. Podcast is really cool. They're only like 3 episodes in so far, but super interesting.
Okay.
And so I'm listening to that, and then like I gave you a couple options for tonight, and you wanted the satanic ritual killing.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I'm like, I love Satanic Panic movies. I loved House of the Devil.
Yep.
And so it's just the whole phenomenon I find fascinating.
Absolutely.
And so I think that adds a lot. And also, I guess being in Indiana, this is 81, which is just 3 years removed from People's Temple Jim Jones.
Yep.
And so that's something that is that's a big like culty true crime thing that would be a huge thing for us to undertake covering, but I'd really, really like to touch on it at some point.
Sure.
Because Jim, I mean, he started his church by taking over his father's church, which was in Lynn, Indiana, which is literally 20 minutes from where I went to high school. My dad worked for the city of Lynn for a very long time. He knew all the police officers there. I got into a lot of trouble there.
Went to school pretty close to there.
Yeah.
It's like, there's a lot. There's a lot of weird times. Also for like just historical context.
Yeah.
The city of Fort Wayne. I mean, we're less than 10 years into segregated schools. I mean, like,
yeah.
So like, I don't know. Like, there's just a lot. Like, so like trying to build context for this is like, okay, we have Jim Jones, we have like, we're like, it feels like 81, like we're so far away from the civil rights movement, we're so far, and it's like not really,
right?
You know, I mean, like there's just a lot around this, especially for kind of the voodoo context, and for the victimization context, and then also for this panic. So I guess to give some clarity, if you're a first time listener, like we're not necessarily like chasing after the topic of like the satanic beheading because of the panic, but it's like it's really more of an interest. It's less about like any kind of like religious or like cultural.
And I think that's going to come into play here. So we'll go a little bit further in, and then I do have a disclaimer that I kind of want to give.
Perfect.
About halfway through because of what this specifically deals with.
Perfect.
Also, if you're listening, we don't consider ourselves a true crime podcast. I don't consider this even a true crime episode. we try to find these real weird stories that have some kind of supernatural or paranormal aspect to them.
Yep.
And this case specifically does have a very spiritual
Yeah.
aspect to it.
Think more like X-Files versus true crime.
Yep.
Even though this is a real story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we try to find things that actually happened. And this one just so happened to have a murder. So Carter's body was found in his sleeping bag with, there's a lot of different reports of what was done to the body, but the kind of the best one that I found said that there were 2 corn cobs and a chicken wing that had been jammed into his neck place.
So I've kind of the chicken wing, I guess it's a universally recognizable thing, because every report that I saw, and I saw maybe 4 or 5 different articles, they're all secondary articles. So like I did not read primary sources on this.
Nope.
But a lot of like the chicken wing was universal.
Mm-hmm.
I read corn cob and then I read corn kernel.
Oh, okay.
And it seems like it would be really hard to identify a corn kernel, right? I mean, like, I've dissected a frog before, never a human cadaver, and it would be hard to locate a kernel. So I feel like the cob thing we need to stick with.
Yeah.
For this case,
sure.
Seems more real. Like, I don't know. It's provides better imagery too.
So the case was assigned to San Francisco Police Department Inspector Sandy Gallant. So Gallant had recently headed up the department's investigation into the Jonestown Massacre, which is kind of why I wanted to make sure that we had reference for a time period of that.
Yep.
So she helped out with Jonestown and People's Temple and its connection to San Francisco. In doing that, she kind of became the department's kind of like go-to for anything outside the ordinary.
Yeah.
That may be occult related or whatever. And in 1981, with the Satanic Panic, we have many cases like this, like the one that's described in that Uncovered podcast, like the West Memphis 3, all of these types of things that have become very famous now. Just the Satanic Panic phenomenon is sweeping the nation.
Yeah.
So to have someone who's like a pseudo expert,
right,
or maybe is an expert. I mean,
or they were deemed by their department as an expert. Like, hey,
that's the biggest thing
you just keep getting these cases, so I guess you're an expert now.
Yeah, I found a actual article. It's on the internet, and it's from 1989. So 8 years after this case, but it's all about Sandy Gallant and how her expertise has been like pulled on for cases all across the country.
Dang.
And like, I think it's crazy that LA Times has stuff from 1989 on their website. That's pretty cool.
That's
like,
pretty cool.
It's the actual articles. I don't know. This is interesting. Anyway, so at first glance, Gallant says that this looks like something from a religion called Santeria.
Yeah.
And so this is where I kind of wanted to give kind of our kind of disclaimer is that like, we're going to do our best to describe what happened and what, you know, kind of interesting, spooky thing this might be. But I'm also not here to say that I know anything about the religion or practices of Santeria, or say that they're bad, or say that they're demonic or Satanism or anything like that. I'm not here for that. I'm here to say this is what the facts,
this is what we found and
say. And so that being said, I needed to do a little bit of research on Santeria. Yeah. Because it seems, she says at first glance, it looks like this is a ritual from Santeria. Because the only real connection that I have to the religion of Santeria is the Sublime song.
That's it. That's it. That's all I got.
That's all I got.
Yep.
I don't practice Santeria, and I ain't got no crystal ball.
Yep. There it is.
So Santeria is an Afro-American religion of Yoruba origin, and it developed in Cuba among West African descendants. Santeria is a Spanish word that literally translates to the worship of saints. It is influenced by Roman Catholicism, as well as kind of mixing in some like voodoo practices.
Of course it does.
Exactly. Which, as we know from like, if you've done any kind of history on New Orleans and like Louisiana type voodoo, it has always mixed in Catholicism and saints and all that stuff as well.
Absolutely.
And, you know, Mary and all those things. So that being said, kind of a little bit down the road, Gallant was able to kind of more closely define what she thought this was. And from, like I said before, from what I've read, it seems like Santeria is a very legit religion that is not meant to be one where you cut people's heads off in the middle of a park. Like
there's so many wide interpretations of every religion.
Right.
And I think we leave it at that. Like,
yeah,
from what I saw, again, quick search. I'm not practicing. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know, but like, yeah, I couldn't find any evidence.
So she kind of narrows it down to this other thing called Palo Mayombe, which is a similar, albeit darker religion that was brought to the Caribbean by slaves from the Congo.
Oh.
So Palo Mayombe 2 is also what Mexican and U.S. investigators say intertwined the gruesome deaths of at least 15 people murdered in Matamoros that was earlier this exact same year.
Okay.
So Matamoros City in Mexico. Yeah. And I have a little bit of information on that as well because there was a guy, Adolfo Constanzo, who was a very well-known serial killer, drug dealer, and cult leader who basically, built up this Palo Mayombe cult in Mexico. And he was really well-known for drug running, and like he basically had his own little cartel and like ran the city, and kind of where he ended up misstepping and ran in him getting caught was some of his guys killed this American boy there. I'm calling him a boy because he was a college student, but like this college kid was there with his friends on spring break and he got killed, and then all of a sudden obviously draws a lot more attention.
Revealed.
Yeah.
Yep.
But he practiced a lot of these rituals that involved a lot of like animal bones and creating brews of animal parts and human parts and sacrifices and all this stuff. And he seemed to truly believe, maybe it was his psychosis or whatever, but like I don't know. It didn't, from what I've seen, it doesn't look like it was a game to him. Like he believed that this is why he was so successful as a drug dealer and like running this cartel is because he led this church in his eyes.
Yeah. Well, and if I remember right, Costanzo, he was like raised, like one parent was like, I think Catholic,
probably,
and then I think one was like practicing voodoo worshiper. So it was like, I mean, like if you're raised in a household where you're constantly being, these things are being revealed to you.
He was baptized Catholic, and he also accompanied his mother on many trips to Haiti to learn about voodoo.
Okay, so I had the parents flipped,
no,
but like
perfect.
it was like, but like I mean, I can only imagine like as a kid, you're being fed. This is truth. And like I think most households, you get one piece of information from both parents.
Right.
And then in a situation like this, and he's certainly not one of one. I mean, he's one of hundreds of thousands. But like you're getting two separate pieces of quote unquote truth from two different sources. And then if you experience any kind of success and you are taking an amalgamation from either of those sources, of course. Yeah. I mean, like it's going to be legit. I mean, what in his mind.
Right. So absolutely. So I did find there is one website, palomayombe.net, that has an About Us section.
Okay.
So
I'm ready.
I wanted to read at least a little bit of what Palo Mayombe is, or at least seems to be, from the internet.
Do they have a I'm interested in visiting tab?
They have a lot of it's in Spanish. There's a consult us.
Okay.
A contact us, I guess. Anyway.
Sorry.
Palo Mayombe originated from the African Congo, and it is said to be the world's most powerful and feared form of black magic. In Santeria religion, there exists a dark side called Palo Mayombe. Individuals who practice this dark aspect are often called palero. Palo Mayombe has a very long and historical history. This magic was transported to the Caribbean during the Spanish slave trade to Cuba and to Puerto Rico in the 1500s. The influence of Palo Mayombe can be found in Central America, Brazil, and Mexico. In Brazil, it is called Cumbanda. It is a mixture of traditions from the Congo, indigenous people in India, and Latin American spiritualism. The biggest differences between Palo Mayombe and Santeria is that the religion of Santeria uses the forces of light, and members of Palo Mayombe use their forces of darkness to achieve their goals and magic spells. So very clearly, I mean, not to make it this simple, but it sounds like at least this website is very black and white, very Sith and Jedi.
Yep. I was going to say, like, a lot of these terms should be relatively universal for most people.
Right. Yep. So where things get interesting is Sandy tells the department, hey, this isn't over. They took the head. They're going to use the brains, possibly some other pieces from the head to make this brew.
Yep.
And in 42 days, they'll bring the head back to the same place. And it seems like maybe it was because Satanic Panic and like people, were really freaked out by it, but also these things are happening all over the place. I'm sure crime in San Francisco in the 80s, there was plenty of other things going on in those 42 days.
Oh, yeah. Well, and this time, I mean, to build, again, a little bit more context for maybe someone who isn't steeped in U.S. history, whatever the case may be, some would argue even current events. But, I mean, like, San Francisco at this point is not the peace, love, and dope San Francisco of the 60s. Like, marijuana has been replaced by mushrooms, which has been now replaced by meth and heroin. I mean, it's
in your early 80s.
It's ugly.
Cocaine drug trade from Mexico.
It's bad. It's, like, San Francisco is a very, like, at this point in 81, very dangerous city, especially for these realms, right? I mean, like, I'm sure that there are plenty of people living peaceful, happy lives in San Francisco. I'm certainly not saying it's, but for a poor homeless dude hanging out in Golden Gate Park, like, this is not going to be a good situation. And then on top of that, whatever this is.
So the weirdest thing, I think, and the thing that to me really kind of confirms that there's some sort of spiritual component to this story and why it's worth a real weird story coverage, is that 42 days later, the police aren't really patrolling the park. Because I'm sure, like I said, they probably had plenty of other things to do that seem much more important.
And poor Sandy's not an expert yet. You know, like, in 89, she's an expert. In 81, she's not an expert yet.
And the head returns.
Yeah.
But they didn't have enough. I think Sandy and, like, one other officer I saw a lot of different accounts of this specific part, but the one that seemed the most believable to me was that, like, Sandy and one other officer, like, took the time to go out and check, but they just didn't have the coverage.
Well, and so I've actually, what's really weird is you sent the story over, and like the article that I was able to find, they gave like images of the park, and I've been here. I've walked around this lake. Like, me and my wife strolled in this. Now this park is huge. It's like, it's the Central Park of San Francisco.
Absolutely.
There's a big body of water. I'm certainly not saying that I was at this spot, but that goes to show you it's huge. I mean, it'd be like two officers going out, even if they knew the general area, even if they went to the scene. Two officers is not. I mean, it's a needle in a haystack, and I mean, it's a mouse fart of a chance. So strange, though. It's strange that she would be on,
that
it
on the
feels,
nose too.
It feels that X-File-ish, right? Like, old Mulder, nobody believes him.
Yes, it totally feels like that.
Weird.
42 days, it's gonna be back, and you can catch the guy. And then 42 days, the head is back.
It is.
Brains are missing. We never saw who dropped it off.
Weird. It's weird. It's one of those, and it's one of those stories, like, we don't know the other side. Like, like there is That's no true. Like we
That's
don't
true.
like a lot of these, we get kind of this, oh, this happened, then it kind of led to this, and there's speculation of other rituals and this group doing other things, but like I at least I didn't find like, why did they need this? What did this drive to?
Right.
It's
Yeah,
weird.
yeah, that's true. And you know, I've seen a lot of people who have kind of followed up on this and, you know, tried to figure out how Sandy Gallant knew that it was going to be 42 days.
Right.
The quote that she has is that they use the brains to create a brew. She didn't really describe what the brew may be for, or what it does, or what would be the point of it. And it seems like no one was able to really get that information.
Yeah. Another kind of strange note is, from what I read again in a couple of the articles, the coroner's report. It's like this decapitation was expertly done. Like
yeah,
precise.
That is
to
interesting.
where it wasn't just like, because like we've also seen a lot of these stories where like, oh, it's people trying to imitate this,
right?
Or
it's a Manson-esque
yeah
type thing. It's people who really don't know what the hell any of this is. They saw something like this in a movie or read it in a book that, if if you cut off a chicken's head and do this, then you'll be wealthy or something. I'm going to do that to a human because it'll work even more. And they use these belief systems as an excuse for their insanity and their need to cause harm to someone.
And even if looking at like the Ted Bundy files, like he even had mistakes, right? Like the one chick got away, like, and so it's like in this situation, if this was the first time, either A, who is doing it, or B, it's not a first time. Like they've done this so many times before, right? I mean, like, I don't know, man. There's just it's strange.
It's pretty strange. My favorite random comment on a theory was I saw on Reddit, someone said, well, was anyone actually watching Sandy for those 42 days?
Right.
Maybe she was the one that did it in the first place. Maybe spending all this time researching, Jonestown kind of did something to her, and I'm going to do this. I'll never get caught because they're going to call me in as the expert.
Right. And they're going to continue to tout me as the expert. Like, it's weird.
Now, I don't want to do either side here. I don't want to push our view of Sandy as
certainly not
an expert or a hero. I also don't want to say that she is a bad person, but I do want to say that some of the things I found out about Sandy Gallant's work kind of later throughout the 80s and some causes that she took to very passionately are ones that are red flags to me. Which is almost more concerning of just the idea that like she was right about that thing, and then she kind of goes off the rails later on and on some things that I really don't agree with. So then it has me like, I don't know. This is. She eventually became a very outspoken opponent of the popular role-playing game Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay.
Even giving lectures around the country, warning parents of its connection to occult murder and suicide.
Okay. Which again, like,
Satanic Panic, 80s. Yeah. But it's interesting to see her so right about something so dark.
Yeah.
And then so wrong about something so innocent.
Yeah. It's weird. She must. My parents must have been at that seminar because I got that lecture. I had acquaintances playing D&D in high school. Oh, can't do that. Lead you straight to hell.
Now both of us were on staff at a Christian church and also playing D&D every weekend. There you go. 2020. It's a different year. Well, that was 2018, but whatever.
It's weird, man. Like, what? Like, Old Sandy, like, do we
Old
got
Sandy,
any other further timeline stuff? Like,
I really don't. I don't have much else. Let me scan this LA Times article one more time.
sure.
Because that was 8 years later.
It's a complicated individual, man. We're like, and what I tried to like, so I got to build some context about this a little bit, because I could just jump into a couple different topics, and whoever's listening is like, where is his brain going? Recently, and just bear with me for the next like 30 to 60 seconds.
Sure.
Recently, I talked to my kids about, when I say my kids, I mean my students. I'm a high school teacher. The Tiananmen Square massacre.
Oh, yeah.
And so, kind of, I wrapped it up with, do you think with this type of censorship, do you think China long-term will be successful in covering up these kinds of quote unquote stains or flaws on their history? And a lot of my kids were like, oh, no way. They're young American kids, freedom of speech, freedom of press,
power of the internet.
Power of the internet. And I was like, well, first of all, they've been successful thus far. You got to look at these Hong Kong situations and realize that they're doing these independently without the idea of Tiananmen Square, right? I mean, like, they don't know about this because they haven't been educated. And then second, one of their arguments is, well, we still have the information. We take that into China or an older generation. I said, but how long does it take to call someone crazy? Right? Like, how long does it take before they start screaming and we push them to the fringes and say, that person's nuts? And like poor Sandy, like,
true.
Like, and like those two ideologies could be completely separate in her mind, right? Of like, I am an expert in this. Also, I'm just against like anything leading to satanic worship, which could be D&D, right? But if you were a detective on a case for 10 years,
so could Pokemon and Harry Potter.
But if you're on I would imagine that if you are in the height of that, and you are an expert in this field where people are carving out people's brains and they're creating these brews and these spells, and then all of a sudden you have kids who are seemingly doing this same thing. Like, I think about my students who joke about going to World War III, and I say, no. I have family members who fought in Desert Storm, and I know I don't firsthand, but I know what warfare looks like. I have buddies who came back from the War on Terror, and they are different, right? And so, like, don't joke about that shit. And like, so like, do I have old Sandy here who's just like, don't joke about these things. Don't take these things light. Like, I don't know. She went on lecture circuit. I don't know. Again, we're not trying to defend one or two things, but you can see how nuanced these things get. And then on top of it,
it's real easy to fall as an extremist on any side of almost any issue. Yeah.
But like, at the end of the day, we got old Leroy Carter who is missing his brain. See, and he loses his head for 42 days.
Yep.
And he's got an old chicken wing sticking out of his neck hole. Like, it's strange, man. It's
weird
just
stuff.
And the fact that really there is no resolve.
Yeah.
There is no resolve to this story. Like, for those who are listening for these last, however many minutes, and you're like, oh, here comes the big conclusion.
Yeah.
Like, no, I'm sorry. Like, this is probably one of hundreds of strange murders, thousands of strange murders in San Francisco this year alone.
Yep.
And they chalked it up to fanaticism, and really, from what I found, we got some other things linked, right? We had the college kid, and like, I found a couple articles where we had some scrolling of, we think these things are linked, but really, this fanaticism is really, hidden. I mean, it's largely still uncovered, except for if you ask some people, like Sandy, she was pretty outspoken later of, no, it was this, and these are the people, and she was still pointing fingers. But again, when she's on the circuit to speak against D&D, who's listening to her? You know, like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's good.
She's still not technically an expert, right? Like, where's Sandy today?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's weird.
So yeah, and that's what that's what makes it something worth us talking about. So we know we've had a couple different kinds of real weird stories. We did some hauntings. We did some alien visitation type stuff.
Oh yeah.
The last week we had some child disappearances, which I guess actually went live the day that we're recording this. But really what we're trying to explore here are just completely unsolved mysteries. So
Yeah.
any of our stories like this, we're never going to have all the answers.
Yep.
And that's kind of the whole point. And this one also was really interesting to me because of the Santeria adjacent connection. I did see.
Sorry,
You got something?
well, I just like things that should make you think. Like and I started this point and I never got back to it. Like,
yeah.
How did they pick this homeless person? How did they pick this individual who really didn't have many family ties?
Right.
How did they pick and the thing that raised red flags early in this Costanzo's I think he was 26 around this time, young dude,
guy.
And that's when they first killed that college student. How did they sidestep that again? Right? I mean, I can tell you of some people, I have buddies now who are traveling across the country, either riding their bikes or hiking or couch surfing. They would look damn near homeless. Hell, they may even be sleeping in parks. They still have families.
And especially if you're in San Francisco. I mean, the weather's great outside.
Yeah, and they still have families. They still have connections. They still have plenty of money in the bank. They still have plenty of purpose in life. They may be on their own pilgrimage. They may be on their own self-exploration.
Right.
Hell, it just may be what do they call it when you take a professional leave for mental health sabbatical?
Yep. Figuring shit out. That's what I call it.
Yeah, and so how did that yes, those things that I talked about early, African American, Vietnam vet, homeless, but how did they know that he was this person, right?
Yeah.
How did they identify this? Did they not? Sorry, I didn't mean to
you're good.
Kibosh that last part, but I meant to full circle that when I mentioned it earlier. Is there's still a lot of questions of how did they just pick this victim, the one that we know of. There could have been more, and there are some that are linked out there, but it's just very specific. And again, an African American at this time isn't going to raise as many eyebrows.
Mm-hmm.
I would pray that in 2020 we're further past that. But 81, San Francisco, Vietnam vet, what seems to be homeless, 20 something.
Yep.
You're not going to raise a lot of eyebrows.
Right.
I don't know. It's just, there's a lot, there's more uncovered than just who are these guys and what is this situation? No, it goes down to who they picked as their victim and
Absolutely.
And where, and,
Yeah. I mean, this wasn't just, let's say there is that we do have the straight on connection to Costanzo and what was his group called?
Oh, I forget. I just had it up too.
He was El Padrino. They were the narco Satanists.
Yep.
In Spanish, Los Narcos Satanicos.
Yep.
Satanicos, probably. Narco Satanicos, which would be drug Satanists. Literally exactly what he was going for. Let's say there is, that connection there. This election seems weird. I mean, even if they are operating, in Matamoros or even Mexico City, I don't know, to come to San Francisco,
right?
Whenever it's probably a lot easier to grab someone,
absolutely,
in Mexico,
absolutely, yeah. And somebody who's, though maybe off the books as homeless, on the books as a vet. I mean, we know this person, we know their information, we know, when they come up in the victims, is anybody asking? Maybe not, but we have their information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the thing about Santeria that I find really interesting, and just what kind of really drew me into this story, seeing that it was somewhat adjacent to that religion, is I used to listen to a podcast a while back. I'm not necessarily going to name it because I don't want to mess up any details about this story and whatever. But these people did exactly kind of what we do, but they had a much bigger budget, and they're able to even go places and talk to people and
sure, just
trying to learn more about the world and the spiritual world that does exist and things that are unexplained and, paranormal, supernatural type phenomenon. Which I think that that's so obviously we're first and foremost a horror movie podcast, but I think that's what's cool about us is that we do have kind of this roots in the Christian church, and at least are able to have enough of an open mind about things like this that we can have a discussion about it.
For sure.
Which is, why I like being able to do stuff like this on the show. I'm not opposed to ancient aliens maybe being Jesus. You know what I mean? Like I'm willing to have that conversation. Like
Still living in Antarctica, just saying.
Like, so anyway, but that's the Santeria thing is these people, they went and seen, I forget exactly what like their kind of priest is called. I think it's like a Santo or like a Santorini or something like that.
Santa?
It's not Santa. But it is actually like the most like intense episode of their podcast that they ever had was when they went and met with this guy and like just had these like really strong like spiritual epiphany stuff. And like their show is like our show.
Sure.
I mean, like they make just as much like fart and shit jokes as anybody else.
Yeah.
And like this episode was like super heavy and intense, and it was like the only time that they ever like went that deep, and like they like came out of it and said like there's things that happened when we talked to this guy that we don't even want to put in the podcast episode. Like just like things that he was able to discern about ourselves that we didn't know about ourselves, or we were like there's no way anyone could know these types of things about ourselves. And so like that's why like the Santeria connection really got my attention, because I had seen some people who, I mean, I get it. I don't know these people. You don't know us, probably. Well, let's be honest. Probably no one that listens doesn't know us. Probably.
Right.
It's only like there are 5 friends.
Yeah.
But when you listen to a podcast time after time, that's what's so great about this medium, is that it's in your ears, and it does feel so much more personal of a connection. So like I feel like I knew these people, and I got to like feel a little bit of the experience that they went through, and then I'd see this story about the dark side of Santeria. I'm like, I got to know more about that. So yeah, anybody out there who has more information about Santeria, or what was it called again? The Palo. Shoot, I'm gonna mess it all up.
Mess it up, brother.
Mess it up bad. Palo Mayombe.
There it is. Any
of that kind of stuff. Hey, let us know. I'd love to learn more about it, talk more about it, any of those kind of things. But yeah, you got anything else before we sign off here?
Nope. Question everything. There it is.
Oh shit! There they go. There they go.
I got it.
Okay.
But we gotta sign off fast because probably more's coming.
The whole horror toy shelf is coming down.
I'm sorry, I got too excited about my one very simple statement.
We got to get that. I got to move that. It's a dangerous spot. Yeah, I mean that pretty much does it for us. So unless you want to knock something else over before I stop.
Nope.
Okay.
Nope.
All right, for next video, I am James, and this guy over here,
I'm Cody.
we're just saying thanks for stopping in.